Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
You may have heard about Jobs to be Done through Clay Christensen's work on what job people hire a milkshake for. And today we've got Tony Ulwick, the inventor of Jobs to be Done and outcome-driven innovation, sharing his thoughts and ideas with us. Unfortunately, V was sick for this episode, but I think you're going to love this show.
Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast, a place for business leaders to get the best and most credible information on marketing, strategy, and innovation. Your hosts, Marc Binkley and Vassilis share their experiences as they gather insights from the world's leading experts. Now, on with the show.
Welcome to the show today. We've got Tony Ulwick, the inventor of outcome-driven innovation and Jobs to be Done theory. Founder and CEO of Strategian, and owner. This was fascinating. I thought, Tony, I was looking through your LinkedIn profile. There's 12 patents that you have related to this process.
That's right.
Yeah, and it was amazing looking at that because I'm like, that's incredible that you would have patents for. I always thought patents of being a physical thing, but for the systems and the process and creating the outcome-driven innovation. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder getting patents for processes, but we were able to secure 12 of them, like you said.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for being here and inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. There's lots of things we're going to talk about today, but a big part of it is segmentation. We're just in the preamble warming up for this, talking about how the way we segment traditionally is like kind of one of those invisible hands that guide how we do things. And then at the end, we look at the results and we go, did it work or not? And sometimes you don't really even realize what the inputs were that created an outcome. And segmentation to me is one of those things. You spent a lot of time thinking about this. There's this idea around or stats around new products and services failing quite frequently, like a third of them or 3/4 of them, sorry. 90% of startups fail, allegedly. And so there's a lot of opportunity for growth. There's also the stat from your book, Jobs to be Done, which talked about how the success rate you have had with some of your ODI cases or outcome-driven innovation cases was like 86%, which is almost the exact opposite number. And so I'm so excited to talk to you about this because I feel like the segmentation component is such a core component of what makes products and new ideas successful. Maybe we could start there. Like from a traditional innovation process, why are they so typically unsuccessful?
Well, there's lots of reasons, and I can get to the root cause here in a second, but most companies innovate backwards, I would say. They come up with ideas and then they test them in the marketplace and they refine them. They pivot, they fail fast. All that's quite popular in terms of an approach. But let's step back and figure out, well, what are they trying to do? What are all these innovators trying to do? Right?
Yeah.
They're trying to create a winning product. Well, what denotes a winning product? A winning product is, in our language, a product that helps people get a job done significantly better, 15% better or more, or 15% cheaper or more, or both. All right. So that means we're trying to create a solution again that gets a job done significantly better. Now, most people aren't aware of what a job is or how to collect needs around jobs or how to segment using jobs as the baseline for segmentation. And so that they're avoiding this whole needs first approach to innovation.
Right.
That's it at a high level. But if you want to get to root cause, and we've studied this a lot, done a lot of polling and surveys on this. Interesting. Here's a few interesting facts. 86% of product teams don't agree on how to best define a market.
Yeah.
As one, should it be a vertical, a geography, a persona, a technology, or something entirely different?
Yeah.
A second, 91% of product teams don't agree on what a customer need even is. Is
Okay.
it an exciter, a delighter, a specification, a requirement, a pain, a gain, a value driver, or so on, right? You've heard
Mm-hmm.
dozens of terms used to describe what a need is. And then, of course, if you're trying to segment markets around customers' unmet needs, or let's say it another way, if your goal of segmentation is to find groups of people with different unmet needs, then you have to be able to segment around unmet needs. But if
Right.
there's disagreement on what a market is and what a need is, it becomes really difficult to segment around unmet needs.
Yeah. I recently just started my own company, and the most common question I get from everybody I've talked to is, well, what vertical are you going to go after? Meaning what industry? And how are you going to position yourself that way? And so, having probably read your book, it was a big influence on me. But the idea of like segmenting based on a vertical just seemed foreign to me. And yet somehow I feel like I'm doing something wrong because I'm trying to find the common needs across all industry verticals. Or I don't actually really care about the industry vertical. I care more about than what I think are unmet needs,
Yeah,
which I need to validate.
yeah, that's exactly it. There may be the same unmet needs might exist across multiple verticals. So why should you just pick one vertical when your product could be equally effective across multiple verticals? It's too early on in the process to make that call, right? To say, how should I, what segment should I focus on?
Mm-hmm.
See, when people are asking you that question, um, they may be asking one of two things, and it's extremely important to break these out. They may be asking you, what market are you going after,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which could be a vertical, or they may be asking you, what market segment are you going after, which could be a vertical,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, but they're two very different things. The way I look at it is you need to define your market first, then understand the needs that exist within that market, and only then can you segment around unmet needs and find groups of people with different unmet needs. Those become your segments, right? And so
Yeah.
one is a discussion on market selection, if you will, versus segmenting the market. So the two very different things. I just want to lay that out there right up front. They often get conflated as if they're the same thing, as if you're supposed to segment your market as the first step in the process, when in fact, you should certainly wait until you've defined your market, the needs, which needs are unmet, and then figure out what segment of unmet segment of people you want to go after that have some unique set of needs that you think you can address better than anybody else.
So when in a B2B world, the common segments that you would think of are like an ideal customer profile of a buying group of X and a company size of Y in a maybe 2 or 3 different industry verticals. In a B2C world, that often comes up as like a persona. Um, a 18 to 24-year-old female that looks like this, or a 35 to 45-year-old male that looks like this. And so then you oftentimes have things like, okay, well, if we need to innovate and create products for these people, then we're going to set up a skunk works and, fail faster, run a whole bunch of experiments and all that kind of stuff. But it sounds like that's exactly the opposite or reverse of what you're suggesting. Is that
Yeah, it
fair?
is. It's the exact opposite. Um, what most companies do is they don't define the market correctly up front, or worse yet, they have an idea, right? They have an idea, which means they've assumed the market, but they may not have defined the market, right? They may not know what the market is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Right. I have a product in mind, but who's it for? There's a group of people trying to get a job done. Who are those people? What job are they trying to get done? That would be the market, right? But they don't go at it that way. So what they do is they'll go out and do their customer discovery work, and they'll try to figure out the right solution, the right market, and the right
Mm-hmm.
customer needs all at the same time.
Mm.
They're trying to solve a
Really complex.
multivariable,
Yeah.
complex equation when they don't have to do it that way. So in other words, they're trying to figure out the intersection of the market, the needs, and the product.
Mm.
So they're guessing at it. That's why they're experimenting and failing fast and pivoting and all that. That's totally unnecessary. So the approach we take is, let's first define the market, right? Then once you know what the market is, a group of people trying to get a job done. It could be parents trying to pass on life lessons to their children, for example, or a interventional cardiologist trying to restore blood flow to an artery. Those constitute markets, right? They're groups of people trying to get a job done. And once you understand what those markets are, and you say, okay, I'm going to go target that market, then you can break it down into its component parts, understand the needs. And we define needs as the metrics people use to measure success when getting a job done, right? So that's the difference between our outcome-driven innovation view of what a need is versus what the industry standard view of what a need is.
So, like, there's that line about, I don't need a 1/4-inch bit, I need a 1/4-inch hole. Is that the kind of, when you say needs, is that the idea of what you're suggesting?
Well, yeah, it's the perspective of what I'm suggesting. That's right. Mm-hmm. So when people say you don't want the 1/4-inch drill, you want the 1/4-inch hole, that's true, right? So what that means is people are buying the product to create a 1/4-inch hole.
Mm-hmm.
So as a company, you can go to customers and look at them through the lens of the drill maker and say, hey, we're in the drill market and we want to create a better drill.
Mm-hmm.
And our competitors make drills. And that's what you see when you look at it through the lens of the drill maker.
Right.
But from the hole maker, you see out there, there's a group of people trying to create 1/4-inch holes. They don't care what product they're using to do it. They just are trying to get a job done. Right. So if you can study that job at a granular level, you can understand where they're struggling to get the job done perfectly and create a solution that helps them get the job done perfectly. So it's a matter of perspective, right? So instead of looking at the world through the lens of the drill maker, we're looking at it through the lens of the hole maker.
There's, as you were saying that, there's that classic story about Kodak and the guy named Steve Sasson, who's, I think, the inventor of the digital camera that they came up with. It sounds like, in what you were just saying, it made me think of, he was looking at the market in terms of, here's what they're going to need in the future. And Kodak was more looking at, well, we sell film cameras.
Yeah. Well, that's right. They didn't know what market they were in, right? They thought they were in the market of selling film cameras, right?
Right.
As opposed to capturing memories, that stand the test of time, right? So by not knowing what market you're in, you become subject at risk to being disrupted because other people may come along with a product that gets the job done even better.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny about the Kodak story is they had a solution that got the job done better with the digital camera. They just didn't go in that direction. They got flanked by others that invested faster. They just did it more effectively.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to say, we're going to give up on our multi-billion-dollar film product line.
Yeah.
So you can't really blame them for that. But you have to be able to see what's happening, right?
Right.
And then take a measured approach to getting there. They didn't have to be disrupted. They could have disrupted themselves had they had all been on the same page, understanding what it was that people were trying to get done.
Right. Yeah. And so along that line of thinking too, the idea of a persona that you see in B2B or an ideal customer profile you see in like a firmographic kind of profile you see often in B2B, to me sounds like it almost fixates you on the wrong thing. Like you look at the person that's buying film instead of the needs that they have. And so, or you look at the specific category size or like the firmographics of the company instead of like what their needs are. You just look at that thing instead of the thing driving.
Well, let's talk about that because you're on, I think, the key point here. The goal of innovation, the goal of segmentation should be to find segments of people with different unmet needs. Let's just put out there as the goal, right? And if you find those segments, you can treat each of them differently and give them their own products and market to them in the most effective way and so on. It's marketing 101 that, there's always segments of people with different unmet needs. And we've seen that over the thousands of markets that we've studied, there are always segments of people with different unmet needs. In other words, we haven't come across a market yet where everyone agrees on which needs are unmet.
Right.
Right. So I think that's a safe bet. But these personas are an attempt to segment the market around unmet needs. Right. When you create a persona, the assumption is this persona has a difference. The people in this persona have a different set of unmet needs than this persona. And so
Right.
on. But the problem is most of the time that's just plain wrong. Right. They're segmenting around firmographics, demographics, attitudes, behaviors, because they have that data. Right?
Yeah.
And they're using that data as a proxy for unmet needs.
Right.
So they're drawing this assumption, right? They're saying, hey, we have this data. If we pull it together this way, we're going to create these personas, and these groups of people look like they're very different from one another. Therefore, they'll have different unmet needs.
Yeah.
Now, we know from our work, like even in the financial services space, that people that are early in their career and people that are late in their career have the same unmet needs. Now, if you're studying the market from a firmographic demographic standpoint, you would never see that, right? Because it's a bad assumption, right?
Yeah.
And so it goes back to the initial premise. Why are we segmenting? We're trying to find groups of people with different unmet needs. Okay, so instead of segmenting around demographics, firmographics, attitudes, and behaviors, why don't we just segment around unmet needs?
Yeah.
Let's do the obvious thing that we should be doing to end up with segments of people with different unmet needs. Now, the reason this doesn't happen is because in most companies, they don't agree on what a need even is.
Right.
Is it an exciter, delighter, or requirement, specification, a pain, gain, value driver, latent needs? What about those? I could go on, right?
Yeah.
So if you can't agree on what a market is, what a need is, what needs are unmet, then you can't segment around unmet needs. And so now you're guessing with old techniques that really, result often in chasing phantom segments. These really aren't segments of people that have different unmet needs. And that puts the company at huge risk.
I want to ask you more about unmet needs and defining a need in a minute, but there's a few ideas that you put into my head. Two of them. One is there's an idea around to do a proper segmentation. You have to have Tony in one bucket as whatever your qualifications are, and then Marc is in a separate bucket, and those two should never cross over. Unless we're the same, you know what I mean? But otherwise, you and I wouldn't be in different areas. It could be that you're in the States, I'm in Canada, and there's, that's the separator, and that's the way we're segmenting the market. And so there's no crossover. And so that seems to be not necessary when you assign segments based on unmet needs or needs, and then unmet to met.
Yeah, you're right. So you can be, you as an individual can be in different segments of a market at different times.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say you're a dentist and you're trying to repair a cavity, fill a cavity. Okay. And we've done these studies, so this is 100% accurate. We found that there were 3 segments of situations that dentists found themselves in. So when we cut the data, we found that I think the numbers were roughly 19% of the dentists were overserved. About 57% were appropriately served and had a few unmet needs, and about 24% had a large number of unmet needs. All right. And when we looked at the data, we found that the highly overserved segment existed when dentists were working on patients that had healthy gums and just required a small filling. And the highly underserved segment exists when dentists are going after patients that have unhealthy gums and require a large filling, because in that case, the patient tends to bleed more. It impacts visualization. It makes it harder to keep the area dry, makes it harder to contour the bigger filling. So here you have a situation where the same dentist can be in all three of these segments in the same day. Right?
Yeah.
It depends on
and the
patient
is
causing. It's always the situation that they find themselves in that's causing them to have causing the segment to exist. So this is what we always think about. We always think about what is the circumstance that's causing the segment to exist.
Right.
In our work, we call these different complexity factors, and we put them in our surveys. First off, we research them up front where we do our qualitative work, and we ask, in that case, dentists, what makes it harder in one case versus another to fill a cavity? And they would say, well, if the patient can't keep their mouth open long enough, that's a pain. Or where the cavity is, the proximity to the front of the mouth, in the back, if they bleed a lot or not. And they listed off, maybe 10 or 15 items or variables or complexity factors, as we call them. And so we include those in the survey. And when we're asking the dentist to take the survey, we ask them to tell us about the last time they executed this job and who, what type of patient were you working on, what characteristics did they have, and they went through all those, right? And then we give them all the outcomes to rate for importance and satisfaction in that circumstance. And then we segment the market around the unmet needs. And then we look at those questions, the complexity factors, to see which ones apply to each segment. All right. So we're profiling the segments once they're generated using factor and cluster analysis to see who's in them and to see what's causing the segments to exist.
So, in that scenario, it's less about a dentist in a smallish practice living in the Midwest, you know what I mean? And it's more about the scenarios they see, and then you can reverse engineer the commonalities based on the scenarios they see instead of, who the person is and the age of their practice and all those other factors.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Okay, so that's great. Thanks. The second question that came on my mind was, I think I saw you post something on this morning. There's this ongoing conversation that I've seen online in the last couple of days around customers being problem unaware. So and I think I saw you post something about that, if I'm not mistaken.
Customers being problem unaware?
Yeah, like in other words, they're not aware of a problem that they have. And I think it seems odd that they wouldn't be aware of a problem that they have.
Yeah, well, I take that position, right? So most people are pretty aware of the problem that they have, right?
Yeah.
They may not know the best solution.
Right.
But they know that they're trying to get a job done.
Right.
And again, we've studied this at length across all different markets. People recognize there's an issue,
right,
or a problem they're trying to solve. They often look around their house to see, is there anything I can use around my house to help me get this job done? If not, then they go looking externally to say, who could help me get this job done?
Yeah.
Or what services are available, or what products are available. And then they go through the buying process to acquire a product or service that helps them get the job done.
Right.
And then when they get the product home, then they use the product to get the job done.
Right.
And they have a whole set of metrics they're using to say, hey, it got the job done perfectly, or
didn't.
Gosh, it really got the job done poorly, right?
Yeah.
Because I was expecting it to minimize the time it took to get the entire job done and minimize the likelihood of having these side effects, and those are outcomes that I was expecting to achieve, but I didn't achieve them with this product. So now I'm dissatisfied with that solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the implication of that problem unaware thing is the idea is that if you can just make people, from a marketing perspective, I think this is one of those invisible hand ideas. If you can just make people aware of a problem, then you can generate demand for your solution. And I don't know if it's the right way of thinking.
Well, no, I don't think it is. What the reality is, there's always people out there trying to get certain jobs done, right? There's the world's full of this. There's groups of people trying to get jobs done every day, every night.
Yeah.
And your goal as the marketer is to figure out, well, who's our market that we're going after? There's a
Right.
group of people trying to get a job done. It's dentists trying to fill a cavity, right? It's parents trying to pass on life lessons to children.
Right.
It's a million things, right? There's a million, endless number of markets, but the market has to know what that market is, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, they have to define needs through the lens of the way they define the market, which is through the lens of jobs to be done,
Mm-hmm.
right? If people are buying products to get a job done, and we're defining our market as a group of people trying to get a job done,
Mm-hmm.
then let's define needs as the metrics people use to measure success when they're getting the job done, right? Instead of requirements and specifications and specs and requirements and um, pains and gains, exciters, delighters, instead of everything else that we've mentioned a few times,
Mm-hmm.
let's define it in a consistent way each time. Let's define it around what the customer sees when they're trying to get a job done.
Right.
Like when they're trying to prepare a meal, for example, they want to minimize the time it takes to prep the food. They want to minimize the likelihood of overcooking the food or undercooking. They want to minimize the likelihood that it's cooked unevenly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's these mental expectations or outcomes that you hope to achieve as you go about trying to get the job done. And typically within any job, there are 100 or so of these outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And we call these outcomes the needs.
Okay.
That's how we're defining a need. And just take that example further. Half the market may say, with the solution I have, I'm very happy, I'm very satisfied with its ability to minimize the likelihood of overcooking the meal.
Right.
Another 50% may say, I'm very dissatisfied when it comes to minimizing the likelihood of overcooking a meal. Right? So now you have two segments of people, right? 50% of the market in each. One has one set of needs, one has another set of needs. Now, I just did that around one need, right? But we're literally segmenting around 100 needs, right? So you get a very different profile in the end of what each of these segments are looking for. And you may find some needs that are underserved across every segment.
Yeah. So there's, just to take that cooking analogy a little bit further down this rabbit hole, so cooked or undercooked, overcooked, undercooked, rightly cooked, there could be needs along that spectrum.
Sure.
There might be things, needs like along a flavor profile. Health could be one of the needs. So when you're talking about finding out there's about 100 needs in the category like that, it might be that there's multiple needs like those types of things that are within the I'm cooking at home kind of category.
Well, yeah. So you go to customers to have them explain to you what the job is they're trying to get done, whether it's prepare a meal or pass on life lessons to children or whatever it is.
Right.
And the way we do this is we sit down with a group of customers and we have them take us through what they're doing or trying to do, I should say, in super slow motion is the way I like saying this. So I like what we call immersion interviews, where we'll take 2, 3, 4 subject matter experts or job executors that really know their space, and we'll spend about 10 hours with them over 2 weeks, usually in 2-hour increments, where we work through the exercise. We create a framework. We first define what is the job you're trying to get done. We try to capture that at the right level of abstraction and get them to agree on what the job actually is. And then we move on to creating what we call a job map. A job map, it's different than a process map because we're not laying out what are they doing. We're laying out what are they trying to do. Because with 5 people, they're all doing different things, right? So we don't want 5 different maps. Those are process maps. This is the way we define it. We're trying to get behind it and say, despite the fact that you're doing this and using this solution, what are you trying to do?
Right.
And they can all agree on what they're trying to do. So we get it at that level. And then we go down to the outcome level, which is that very granular detailed statements, a set of statements that describe how they measure success. That's where the gold is, right? Everyone knows that, people want to get the job done faster, more predictably, better results, more convenient, safely, but those aren't needs. Those are vague statements that aren't going to help you guide your innovation efforts. So you got to really dig at, how is the customer measuring success as they go about getting this job done? That's what the outcomes are.
So the way you said that, previously when I was thinking about jobs to be done, in my head I was mixing up. I think I'm mixing up. Jobs to be done isn't the same as a need, right? Like the job to be done is the sort of category, and then the need are the things they're trying to do within that category, like preparing a meal.
Yeah. So let me help you with that, because it's confusing. So, and I didn't name this jobs to be done. I called it outcome-driven innovation. It was given the name Jobs to be Done by Clay Christensen, as you're probably aware.
Yeah.
And that
with the milkshake. I mean, the milkshake study is the classic example I always think of. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I introduced him to this approach back in 1999, and he took it in that direction with his books and so on. So, from my perspective, jobs to be done, just as a word or phrase, is simply a perspective. It's a way to look at a market, right? Instead of looking at it through the lens of the drill maker, you're looking at it through the lens of the hole maker.
Right.
That's what jobs to be done is.
Right.
Now, a job to be done is what a customer's trying to accomplish in a given situation, like pass on life lessons to children or restore blood flow in an artery. That's what a job to be done is.
Right.
When we begin to apply it. Now, what we do is, when we define a market, we define the market as a group of people and the job to be done. Right. So now we're putting that theory into practice. Right. We're taking the perspective, and we're saying, if people buy products to get a job done, well, who's the group of people and what is the job they're trying to get done? Define a market that way, and then we define the need as the measurable outcomes they're trying to achieve when they get the job done.
Gotcha.
Right. So we call that highest level thing the market, right? A group of people getting a job done. Then we can break it down into job steps. We have a good article in HBR from back in 2008 that lays this out pretty nicely.
I'll put a note or a link to the notes in that.
Okay. Yeah, it's called the Customer-centered Innovation Map. And then below that, you have all the outcomes. That's the gold, like I was saying. Getting to that level is where you need to be to understand where people are struggling to get the job done. At a very high level, people are trying to get the job done faster, more predictably, and better result. Right? We know that. So all these statements are designed to get at faster, like minimize the time it takes to do X, Y, Z. Predictably, minimize the likelihood that bad things happen.
Yeah.
And minimize the likelihood that this thing that causes a bad result doesn't happen. Right?
Yeah.
So if we know all those things, we can put together this framework for the market that lasts for a long time. It's all this is stable over time. Think of what you're doing here is building a stable framework that you can use for years to come to guide your marketing efforts, your R&D efforts, development, and so on. Because once you know how people measure success in getting a job done and where they struggle, your goal as a company is to consistently help them get the job done better.
Right.
And better and better.
Right.
And if you're Kodak and you see a technology coming along that holds the potential to get the job done a lot better, you'll sit there and say, wow, look at this.
Yeah.
This technology can get satisfied this outcome better, that outcome better, this outcome better, right? This is the technology we should invest in.
Yeah.
Right. Because you'd have the framework to see it.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to, not having the ability to see it because you're looking at the market through the lens of the filmmaker in that case.
So in the case of Kodak, then, if I'm understanding this, check me on this to see if I'm getting this right. So the job to be done would be capturing memories, potentially. or
Sure.
that is one of the jobs to be done in that space.
Yeah, for the sake of argument, yes.
Yeah. And so within that, there's the consumers of Kodak's products, or like you and I, general people, would have a whole bunch of needs that are within that. And so Kodak, by understanding the job to be done that customers have, can orient their own R&D production or R&D investments and all of that kind of stuff, and distribution and all that based around that job to be done, but focusing on the needs within, or especially the unmet needs within that category.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So uh, simply, you're just trying to help them get the job done better, faster, more predictably, better result.
Right.
So if you know all the measurable outcomes people are trying to achieve when they're going after getting the job done, now you have this framework.
Yeah.
To say, oh, okay, this is what we got to work on over time.
Right.
And what we often see is most products don't even get the entire job done. Most products only get parts of jobs done.
Right.
And people have to cobble together multiple solutions to get the entire job done.
Right.
And we see this over and over again. But what happens over time is people want a single solution that gets the entire job done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which makes sense, right? So then you see these platform type companies that pull it all together, and they're very successful.
Yeah. I was thinking like Microsoft Office would maybe as an example of that, where we have Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, and all the things that are with that. But each one of those is serving a specific job to be done, but collectively
they pull it all together.
Yeah, they work together.
Well, I was even going to go simple, like Keurig or Nespresso.
Oh, sure.
Right, where they get the entire job done. So instead of someone have to boil water over here and go get the ingredients over there, and quite literally cobble together the solution.
Right.
All you do is put the
put the pot
container in there and hit the button, and there it is. Right, entire job done.
Yeah.
Single platform. That's what I'm going after. Right?
Yeah. I got you. Yeah, that makes tons of sense. There's another question I had too about category entry points. So I know I sent you a note about this earlier. I don't know if how comfortable you are talking about that, but it's a language, like I always associate it with a purchase trigger. And so those are the things that get people to enter into a market or into a category of products or services. And so I struggle with the idea and the difference between category entry points and jobs to be done. I'm not sure if you could comment on that, or if you've got any thoughts on it.
Well, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
And thanks for sending that along, Mark. I hadn't studied that prior, so this is to take a look at it. And what it appears to me, first off, I think the category entry points are conflating a circumstance with a job to be done.
Okay.
So in the examples that you sent, I see both.
Mm-hmm.
Right? People, you're going to have a group of people over for a bite to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you got to go shop and get the right food.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The circumstance is I'm having a bunch of people over to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then now I got to go buy food. It's sort of like the job, right?
Right.
So one's kind of triggering the other, but I saw them in a list like conflated, like they were. I think it was like regarding getting a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Keep me energized during the morning. Keep me energized during the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's two different things, and there could be two different circumstances. But let's say it like this. With food examples are the most difficult examples to explain because food is like a platform level product.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is you can add anything you want to food or any ingredient and change what the product is.
Right.
Right. So like we've done work with companies that make cheese or make butter or sell bananas, right? And these are food products that people hire to get a job done or multiple jobs done, right? So when you go into the food space, we often have to look at this a little differently. And I don't want to make it more complex than it needs to be, but
Mm-hmm.
People hire bananas to get lots of jobs done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And broadly speaking, let's say a banana is a snack.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are all the jobs that people hire snacks for? There's well over 100 reasons why people buy products or jobs they're trying to get done when they're hiring different snacks.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you hire chocolate over popcorn?
Right.
Or a banana over another fruit,
right.
and so on. And so it really becomes complex when
Yeah.
you're talking about foods.
Yeah.
When we studied those different products, we would look at all the reasons people hire those products, all the jobs they're trying to get done, and try to segment into groups of people who are trying to get different jobs done. So, for example, on the banana one, we discovered a segment of people that were underserved when trying to find a snack that would help them get to sleep at night and stay asleep at night.
Okay.
There was no product that existed. Now, the interesting part about that story was with Chiquita Brand International that we were doing the work with. And I don't know if you know this, but there's over 10,000 different varietals of bananas. And the most common banana that you're probably aware of has tryptophan in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can control the level of tryptophan in a banana.
Oh, no way.
So if you wanted to, you could create a product that could put people to sleep at night.
Crazy.
But Cheetah International said, our brand's about bananas that give you energy and wake you up in the morning. You can't confuse that with products that put you to sleep at night. Right. So they didn't pursue that. But I found that really interesting as an opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah. So those high level categories, like I'm trying to get sleep at night, those are circumstances people find themselves in, and they say, okay, I need to go get a job done. I want to hire a solution that helps me get to sleep and stay asleep.
I got you. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense the way you're saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think those are equivalent to a category entry point.
Right. Yeah. To me, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I would just be careful in making sure not to conflate the circumstance with the job itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The banana, though, interesting because previously, or one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is a job to be done necessary only, or like segmenting the market only possible for brand new products, or can existing products and companies use this method of segmentation to create new revenue paths and that kind of stuff for themselves? And the banana was an interesting one because it's clearly not a new product.
No. Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, on the banana one, that was funny because we got a call from them and they said, we want your help to try to reinvent the banana. And I thought it was a crank call, but it turns out it wasn't. But of course, yeah, many of the projects we work on are with companies with existing products and they're trying to grow in their core market. Even in that dentist example that I gave you earlier, most of the products were aimed at the segment in the middle, where it was 57% of the market that were pretty well satisfied with the products that existed as they were today.
Mm-hmm.
But you might recall I said there were 19% then on top of that were highly overserved and 24% that were highly underserved.
Right.
So those two segments represented two very different opportunities to grow in the same core market.
Right.
Right. And that market's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Right? And we see this routinely. There's almost always room for growth in the core market.
And yeah, I keep flashing to this picture I've seen recently in my head, where like in this marketing tech stacks of the world and like CRM stacks and all those like options that are out there. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of products, or thousands in some cases, tens of thousands in certain markets. And so a lot of those I would suspect are similar, probably, where there's a giant portion of them are targeting the same things, and feature parity, where they're like, oh, they have that, well, we got to have that. And then there's very few that are truly unique and different, and possibly just because they're trying to be the same, because it's safer.
Yeah. Well, we work with a number of companies that are in that position, and what we tell them to do is to pick one job that you can get done better than any other competitor.
Right.
Just do that. Like if you're at parity with everybody, why is anyone going to switch to buy your product?
Right.
Especially in that CRM space, the switching cost is so high. Nobody's going to do that, right? You have to get the job done significantly better before people are going to switch.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can get part of the job done really, really well,
Mm-hmm.
then that could be your starting point or your beachhead, right?
Right.
From there, then go pick another job that is in the stack, right? And get that done exceptionally well, better than anybody else, right? So the goal isn't to create a product that does everything, all the other products do
Mm-hmm.
to the same degree, because people will only switch to your product if it gets the job done significantly better. Like I said up front, 15% better or more,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that means you can't just satisfy one or two unmet needs and say, we're better.
Yeah.
That means you're slightly better. But let me ask you this. Would you switch from your favorite product if this new product promised it would get the job done 1% better?
Yeah. No.
2% better?
No.
5%?
I don't even know if I would know what 5% is.
10%?
Yeah.
15? Okay,
Yeah.
so the reason I'm going through that is it's usually at 15% is that break point.
Right.
Where people say, all right, if it truly gets the job done 15% better or more, I'll consider it.
Yeah. It's funny when you're saying that, it makes me think of that Geico commercial, say 15% or more. Give us 15 minutes, we'll save you 15% or more.
Maybe that's where they got that from. They may have done some work on that too. That's very interesting. I hadn't thought of that. But that's what you got to do. So that means you have to have a very comprehensive understanding of the customer's needs and which are unmet.
Right.
You have to know all the 100+ unmet needs, and of those, hope that 10 or 15 of them are unmet, and hope that you can solve 7, 8, or 9 of them better than the competitor, so that you're getting the job done better, significantly better.
So that's part of the way. And in some cases, or maybe you've seen a case like this, it may be that you don't really even need to change your product, like the banana. It's more the way you position the product.
That's certainly true. We've run into many cases like that. I'll give you, for the marketing folks in the audience, the first time we did this back in 1993, helping Cordis Corporation grow in their angioplasty balloon space, we discovered through our quantitative research that there were 3 unmet needs that their product satisfied better than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And they only had 1% market share at the time, and they started marketing around those other unmet needs, and they grew the market share by 3% additional percent, and within 6 months, just by saying that they're getting the job done better along these dimensions. We worked with Coloplast in the skincare, wound care space, and everybody in the industry was saying we help wounds heal faster.
Right.
Well, the top 10 unmet needs, 10 of the top 15 unmet needs, suggested that they weren't looking for products that healed the wound faster. They were looking for products that made sure the wound didn't get worse.
Yeah.
So what Coloplast did is they said, okay, we're going to change our positioning to we prevent complications. And they touted all the aspects of their product that prevented complications. They got double-digit growth within 6 months.
Yeah, that one hits home for me because my mom had a bed sore. She was in a wheelchair, all that kind of stuff. But that was a huge problem that it just kept getting worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have other examples. We have a good study on our website from Arm & Hammer where they gained 30% increase in revenue year to year without changing their product, without changing the pricing, pure marketing play, because they better understood the goals of the customer. And in their case, they had the job executor wrong.
Yeah.
They thought it was the nutritionist because they sell nutrition products,
Right.
but the nutritionist are only trying to get part of the bigger job done, whereas the dairy herdsman is trying to get the larger part of the job done, which was to optimize dairy herd productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that talking in that language and repositioning their product in that light made a huge difference for them. So it's things like that.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you often hear, like, I've said this too, and I've thought about this a lot, but like you talk about market insights and you think, okay, well, I'm going to go after a sample of, persona X or firmographic Y, and, ideal customer profile, and then try and uncover stuff about that group of people instead of just finding out more about their needs across the board.
Yeah. It's amazed me. We've been talking about it for years. It's just what we suggest is complete backwards from what is accepted.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's hard for people to stick with it.
Yeah.
Right, because I think most people have more of a solution mindset than a problem mindset, so they keep slipping back into solution space. Is
right.
The way we talk about it. Right.
Yeah.
And what we do is we say, okay, you have this product, but what job is that product trying to get done, or what's the job people are trying to get done when they're using that product? Let's go study that.
Yeah.
And break it down to component parts and figure out where they're struggling. And then once we know that, now let's come back into solution space and say, all right, let's help them here or here. Let's help them, minimize the likelihood that the food cooks unevenly or whatever the top outcomes are. Right.
Yeah.
But now it's directed. So you could imagine, let's say there's 150 outcomes in a market. What are the chances that any product team would start with focus on the top 10 or 15 unmet needs?
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't know what those unmet needs were. Another way to say it, what are the chances that a product team is going to focus on the top 10 or 15 unmet needs if they can't even agree on what a need is?
Right. Yeah.
And the answer is near zero. And that's why innovation fails most of the time.
Yeah.
That also explains why we have an 86% success rate.
Right. And probably why there's so many copycat competitors out there, because they can't agree on a need, so they just go, well, what's in the market, and at least we'll stack up against all of that.
Yeah.
It just one other thought, if you don't mind, or question. So we've talked. It was a super interesting conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to share this with me. The idea of around taking that awareness now that you have of the needs, and especially the unmet needs, and then creating products or repositioning products. There's a switch that you make from going from insights into action. And there's, in terms of the innovation approach, I know in the Jobs to Be Done book and some of your other material you've got, talking about how you then implement that and the strategy that goes along with actioning this information. Can you just talk about that a little bit in terms of like what are the next steps after you've done this assessment?
Yeah. So let's finish out the analysis part first. So
yeah, sure.
So let's say we know all the unmet needs. We know there's segments of people with different unmet needs. We know how big those segments are. The next thing we want to do is to say, how do your current products perform in each of those segments?
Right.
So we'll ask that question, and then we'll end up positioning products in the segments.
Yeah.
All right. And then we'll say, okay, so product A is going to target segment 1.
Yeah.
And segment 1 has these 6 unmet needs. So let's go do some ideation work with the product 1 team and come up with solutions that will address those 6 unmet needs to a greater degree.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So product 1 is now elevated itself into a better position and secured itself a market leadership position, for the next X number of years to come, potentially. Same thing with product 2, product 3, right? So that's one part of it. I gave you a few examples of what marketing can do in the very short term, right? if there are unmet needs that you already address, but you're not talking about them, start talking about them.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the low-hanging fruit, right? And
Right.
so instead of saying, hey, we help wounds heal faster, it's more like, no, we prevent complications.
Right.
That's what's differentiating us, and we're going to build our story around that. In the Arm & Hammer case, they actually loaded up an algorithm on their, this is a sales team, put a little algorithm on their Mac Pros, little iPads, whatever they had. And they would go to customers and ask them 4 or 5 questions, and they would know what segment they were in, what outcome-based segment they were in. And so they could address their needs in the most appropriate way. Very, very effective, right? So instead of having the same message for everybody, they knew by asking these few questions that this group had a certain set of unmet needs, and they could
customize the messaging.
Exactly. And that's called a typing tool in the industry. I don't know if you've come across that. But those are just some of the things. We've had companies who recognize that there's parts of the job they're not getting done at all. And so, we set out to help them find a company that did, that could get the other parts done. And they made great M&A candidates. We did something like that in the GM space, for example, where we looked at over 300 different companies that could get the right parts of the job done, or that owned a platform that had the potential to get the entire job done.
Right.
So they could make the right M&A investment decision and so on. So there's, every part of the organization's dependent on understanding what the customer's needs are, which are unmet. And at the top of the show, you talked about strategy, right? To me, strategy and innovation and everything we've talked about here are the same thing.
Yeah.
Strategy is picking which segments you want to go after, which unmet needs you want to target, and coming up with the solutions that address them.
Right.
Because that's really all that matters.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, totally.
Yeah. And so they tie together, hand in glove.
Yeah. Tony, this is amazing. I'm so appreciative of your time. This is just like, it's such an eye opener for me, because there's such a traditional approach to, like you mentioned it, the attitudes, the behaviors, the psychographics, that kind of stuff. And this is a totally different approach to it, but it seems so obvious, but I'm, until finding out about your work, I didn't really ever think about it. And so it's fascinating. It's so good.
I appreciate that, Mark. Yeah. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah. How can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Well, one thing they could do, they could download my book. It's free at jobsdonebook.com with hyphens in between all the key words there. And that comes in audio form or ebook form.
Yeah.
Or they could reach out to me directly at ulwick@strategian.com. That's ULWICK @strategian.com.
Amazing. Yeah, and the book is great. It's so well written too, by the way. I wanted to congratulate you on that, because it's not very like, as complicated as this might all sound, like, it's so conversational. And it was, I aspire to write like that. And I just wanted to congratulate you on that, because it was really easy to read.
I appreciate that.
Just before we get to the post-pod with V and I'm going to just ask to see if you could leave a review. We are always looking for ways to make this show better, and really love your feedback.
I don't know, seeing that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is kind of nerve-wracking.
It gets you fired up a little bit, I think.
Well, maybe a little bit.
Race already. 5, 4.
Let's go. It's post-pod time with your favorite hosts, Marc and V. Is that it?
That's it. I think that's pretty good.
That's it.
I would be happy with that. I am happy with that.
I'm happy with that. I'm always happy.
Yeah. You are pretty happy. Tell me how happy you were about Tony's conversation.
It was actually, first of all, I was upset that I wasn't actually able to be a part of the conversation. Got really sick, unfortunately, and wasn't in a good state to be talking to anybody that morning, unfortunately. But I love the dialogue. I love the kind of going and digging deeper into the idea of segmentation. Really, how do you define, the needs or the jobs that need to be, sorry. See, this is where we're going to talk about this. Like sometimes I got caught up in a lot of the nuances of language around, the jobs to be done. Specifically. But all in all, man, it was a great podcast. I really enjoyed that, and you did a great job moderating that. So it was great.
Yeah, it was a bit weird. I felt like I was missing my left arm or something without having you there.
I am Marc's left arm.
It was just funny. You get into such a rhythm with like two
course.
people interviewing, and then all of a sudden you have to do it on your own. Like, wait a sec, where's the other guy?
Wait a second.
Why am I not like hearing a question? Why am I always that? It was weird.
Yeah,
anyway, it was good.
Though.
Yeah, he was. So there's one thing I thought was really fascinating. I had written a note here. 86% of teams don't agree on what the market need is.
I wrote that down too as well. So it's like we've been doing this a long enough time right now. We're likely writing down the same things. Yeah. What are we doing out there, people? Why can't we agree on some of these fundamental things?
I get it in some ways. Like I worked on a couple products, and it's interesting because the way that you see the market changes from person to person, I think. And unless you are explicit and clear about what the market needs are, you begin to start thinking that your product features are the needs in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Or the product benefits the needs, but you don't necessarily have everyone agreeing about what those are.
No, that's fair. Like, I guess why am I surprised? I shouldn't be surprised. It makes sense that it is going to vary from person to person, and this is where you need to make sure you really have really strong data that can help guide some of those thoughts, right? And I think the one thing Tony really articulated really well is how do you make sure that you do have these data sets that allow you to inform, at the end of the day, the jobs to be done. So you talked about the 86% of product teams that don't know how to define the needs. Then he also had the 91% of product teams don't agree. Or sorry, no, you use the 91% right now, right?
Yeah, sorry. I think it was 86% of teams don't agree on the market, and 91% of product teams don't agree on what the need is. I might have mixed up the two different descriptions. Yeah.
Which again, for me, was really interesting.
Yeah, totally. And the other one that kind of throws me off is the whole like startup playbook around, here's the way we do things. We acquire customers, low cost per acquisition. We look at a calculated lifetime value of X, here's your payback period of Y. And then, scale. So, or hyperscale. Right?
Go.
And so that's interesting because it's like a pretty standard playbook. And yet you have 17% of startups succeed. Whereas in his process, the outcome-driven innovation, you have 86%. So there's a pretty substantial gap there in terms of using tools like jobs to be done and outcome-driven innovation to improve business outcomes. And I think some of it starts with just the agreement and the alignment on what the market is and what the needs are.
You just said something that triggered a thought. In the podcast, he talked about how it wasn't originally called jobs to be done. It was, for him, it was outcomes driven innovation, essentially. So I thought that was interesting that it ended up being defined as something entirely different because of Christensen. I don't remember
Clay Christensen, the milkshake.
Clay Christensen. Yeah, exactly. But anyways, I think though, when we go back to the framework is very simple, right? So like he continuously kind of talked about two things that you need to do first. First of all, you need to define what your market is. And then second, define the needs of that market. And that essentially defines your segmentation, right? Mm-hmm. He was suggesting that sometimes those two things are somewhat used interchangeably a little bit, but they are still fundamentally two things. So under the market first is understand the needs of the market, what needs are not being met, and then group people trying to get a job done. So that's like the three things. And then on defining the needs of the market itself is group people with unmet needs. That informs your segmentation. So I thought it was really interesting kind of looking at that through that lens and say, okay, these are the first two things that we really have to do. And that, and then again, essentially should help, push people down that right path and say, okay, what is our product actually doing? And I loved your push on the, you don't need a 1/4 inch bit. You want to create a 1/4 inch hole. And that's in essence, it's the jobs to be done framework, or the mindset is like finding solutions for that hole that you want to create, not the bit that you need.
Yeah. And I think that's going back to the product features thing. Like you have a product, let's say a drill bit, and it can create a 1/4 inch hole. And so you think that the 1/4 inch hole is maybe the thing. But there's also like, what I like about this is you get locked into this idea that a market segment is an industry vertical. Like, I don't know, oil and gas, or
totally
men 25 to 64, the demographic, behavioral, psychographic, like that kind of market segmentation.
Yep.
And it's so much more nuanced than that. And I think that's part of the thing that's fascinating about this to me, is that we've talked about this before, when you're building market segments, you should have individual people in each segment, and they shouldn't be in multiple segments. And that's how you know when things are right. But his point of view is that's not true, because their needs of a 1/4 inch hole could, come from any segment. Could be man, could be woman, could be like a 18-year-old, could be a 36-year-old,
totally,
could be somebody in oil and gas, could be somebody in quick service restaurants. Like, and you can be in that need in one moment, and you could have another need state, another segment, different moment. And so, and then there's also all kinds of people that have different needs, or that are using different solutions. Like we talked about satisficing a lot.
Yeah.
Like the idea that I can use a drill bit to do that, but I can also use a fork in theory. I could use a screwdriver. Like, there's all kinds of things I can use, and I will use, because I'm trying to fix this, and it may not be a well-met solution, but
totally.
Yeah, it's so interesting just reframing how people actually do stuff, and they're trying to get a job done.
Yeah.
And thinking about a market that way, as opposed to just being like, those standardized industry verticals or psychographic, demographic verticals.
Yeah. And it's all a part of segmentation. I guess you can look at it, it is, there is value, but I think in his point, he says like individuals can be in different segments of markets at different times as well. So because of that, if you are going down the psychographic demographic side, you may be missing an entire opportunity of the overlap or the constant shifting that consumers are doing in and out of these spaces. And I feel like this framework is a lot more fluid than a lot more of the traditional segmentation analysis that exist.
Yeah. And the more the needs are met within a segment, the harder it is to sell.
Totally. Yeah.
It's interesting.
If you think about that, you're right. I don't think that really dawned on me though, as before the conversation, but now coming after listening to your conversation with Tony, like you're like, oh my goodness, wait a second here. I don't know. We'll talk about the bananas in a bit. I don't want to burn that matchstick yet, because I think that was a really interesting take as well. But all I'm trying to say is when you think about the fluidity in markets, you have to step away from a traditional segmentation, which includes like the demographics, psychographics, etc. You have to really orient it against something like a jobs to be done, because then it probably, and you talked about it in the episode, like you can reposition existing products for those various jobs to be doing. Because you may have created the product to do something entirely different, but then there's a use case out there that's like, people are using it, your product to do something different as well. But define the jobs to be done is probably the most important aspect for any new product going to market.
Yeah, and you hinted on that with the banana thing, but there's it's not exclusive to brand new, highly innovative, disruptive technologies, right? Like we're talking about a banana, and he was hired to figure out ways to sell more bananas, which is through like a product feature that it had, or the connecting a product feature to a relatively unmet need I think the unmet need was sleep aids that weren't medical or pharmaceutical.
Yeah. I don't remember the actual, what the, oh my goodness, not the ingredient. Anyways, there's something in a banana.
Tryptophan or something like this. This is the same thing that was in Turkey, I think.
Yeah. Which suggests that it can help with sleeping. So, that was an unmet need. It was an underserved need in the market. So their take was, hey, why don't we look at that as an opportunity to expand, your product to, even though I think Chiquita decided that, we want to be known for giving you energy. We want to be known for, vitality, not putting people to sleep. So yeah, that's a fair play as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Tryptophan. That's what it was.
Tryptophan? Okay.
Yeah. So it converts into serotonin and melatonin. So melatonin is like that little pill that people take when they were like a naturopathic remedy to try and go to sleep.
Right. I don't know. I've never had a problem sleeping, man. I
don't have a problem going to sleep. I just have a problem staying asleep.
Okay.
I'm that guy who wakes up at like 3 a.m, then 5 a.m. I'm like, well, I'm up. I should probably have bananas at that point.
Have a banana, man.
That's a good point. Now I'm going to start thinking about that. Yeah, I just like, there's so much about, I think I can't remember if I talked about this in this podcast or not, but just the idea of invisible hand, like this idea keeps coming back to me where
you did,
because of the way that we think about how segmentation should work, we then start thinking about this like process that naturally falls into place around segmentation, which then leads to targeting, which then leads to positioning. And then you look at your, if you go to their 4 Ps at that point, then your product features and, your benefits and all that kind of stuff. And so that leads you down a path of the way you execute a business. But just as valid is a different form of segmentation, which is this jobs to be done process and outcome-driven innovation, which leads you down an entirely different path.
Totally.
It's so fascinating how like these models kind of shape our thoughts and our behaviors around what's effective, what's not effective, what's the right way to do things. And I keep coming back to that stat around the percentage of startups that succeed. I'm like, why wouldn't we look at something more that has even the remotest chance of giving you a competitive advantage?
He said one thing, and I put a box around it as well. You have to really reconsider and think like, what does a customer see when they're trying to get a job done?
Right.
And I think that phrase in of itself really, for me, personifies what jobs to be done actually is. But it's also taking a different lens and saying, let's see the problem through the lens of the consumer.
Totally.
And really define what that is. And then let's see how our products or even our current products can actually cater to that. Or do we need to innovate? Do we need to change something? Do we need to come up with something else? I think that for me is such if we constantly talk about customer centricity, well, here's an example of that, a very tangible example of saying, this is how we can inform product roadmaps right now, because we're looking at a problem through the lens of a consumer versus just how we perceive the problem, because we've already created a product that helps do some part of it, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why I keep thinking about expenses. I just had to do something recently, but like,
doing expenses again, Mark?
My wife is doing my taxes, and I literally handed her an envelope of receipts.
There you go, honey.
Yeah.
Was it under the table?
She's an accountant, so
That's
I'm like she's, but that's like an envelope is a legitimate way of collating all of my expenses from last year.
That's true.
She's not very satisfied with that, I guarantee. But it's what I did. And then we had my daughter convert all those expenses into an Excel file. So she got some money for that. She got paid to do that.
Amazing.
She was very excited. And then, but I this year I started using Wave. And so Wave accounting software, you can use your camera to take a photo of the expense, and then it converts it into like a digital record. And so it'll almost automatically do that. And there's a whole bunch of other tools that are out there that are kind of like that and that could do the same kind of thing. But yeah, like those are legitimate ways of me as a consumer, like an envelope, shoebox, my daughter, Excel spreadsheet, Wave, all these kinds of things.
Totally.
That are very valid ways of me having done this. And I think, when you think about market expansion, and there's a huge percentage of people that are just using envelopes and shoeboxes.
We use an envelope.
Yeah. For taxes.
It's just the easiest. Yeah.
Yeah.
For some reason in our heads, it's easy because it's like, I know this is something that I can claim at the end of the year. I'm going to put in this magical envelope that we always know where it is. It's very simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We should probably digitize things.
Yeah.
But we don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So like to your point though, going back to the customer centricity, like it's you could easily say, like, if you're Wave, well, our competitor is QuickBooks, our competitor is whatever the other apps are. But you don't always necessarily think of your competitor being Excel or my daughter that's hand bombing receipts into piles and then putting those in Excel, or just an envelope.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think that's where so much opportunity comes from, by thinking about what the consumer is doing. Not to say I'm a perfect consumer example, but it's just an example.
No. Yeah, it's how a consumer perceives a problem that they're trying to solve. Because I think, like, we get caught up organizationally thinking that, we've defined a product that helps meet a need. And maybe it's very true up to a certain point.
Right.
But if we haven't done the analysis on the problem that's actually solving and all the things around it, and the way, like you said earlier, you can punch a 1/4-inch hole multiple ways. You can just jab a screwdriver through drywall. There's your 1/4-inch hole. Well, if it's wood, well, that's going to be a little more difficult to do. So you're going to have to think of another tool, right? So I think naturally as consumers, we're always going to be troubleshooting as much as possible. But even if we go back to some of the conversations we've had with Roger, I know this hasn't aired yet, but with Ari as well, the idea of making it as frictionless as possible is the key here. So, like, if you haven't spent enough time understanding the problem through the lens of the consumer, your product's going to probably fall short at some point.
Totally. Yeah. Or that's a huge opportunity if you've already got it out. And yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting conversation and an interesting model to reframe how you think about the market in general, and a really good point around having agreement on what the market is like.
Totally. Like,
some of our biggest problems are not going to market; it's understanding the market.
It's understanding the market. I also love this is the one last thing I wanted to kind of call to quickly. Excuse me, was category entry points versus jobs to be done.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was getting his perspective on that. I thought was really interesting, because I think you and I would naturally use category entry points as a way of defining, just kind of ways to reposition a product or look at the product in totality. But I love that he kind of articulated through the lens of category entry points are more circumstances that can lead to jobs to be done. So he sees it almost as the precursor to it, which I thought was, I think it's a very valid point. When you're comparing the two, So yeah, just wanted to call that out as well, because that's
that's a good point. Yeah, that is a good point, because previously I've been somewhat confused about like the difference between. I know they're different, but I just wasn't sure what the differences were. It was interesting getting his take on that for sure.
I would have thought the category entry points would have came after. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, if we're doing a jobs to be done, we've defined what the jobs to be done is. Great. It's going to spit out essentially category entry points for that job. The way he talked about it is like, no, the category entry points are a set of circumstances that inform the jobs to be done. So it was really, it totally changed the way I saw it, to be honest with you. But yeah, just really fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Okay, V. Well, this is great. I'm glad we got to do this again. Yeah. I know you weren't part of the original conversation, but it's always awesome having you on this. I love doing this part.
Yeah, man. Me too. This is also great.
Yeah, we've got a couple of really good podcasts. I'm super excited. I mean, we always say this all the time, but I'm really excited about a lot of the guests we've got coming up in the next little while.
Totally.
Yeah, including a big conversation around physical availability. So that should be, that'll be good.
That's a juicy one.
Yeah.
That's a juicy one.
Okay, buddy. We'll talk to you soon. Until next time.
We'll chase profitability.
I'm totally butchering this.
That's okay. I don't know if the last post pod we did, we literally said at the exact
at the same time. I know.
That was incredible.
It was really good. We got to work on our time.
This is great, man.
Okay. Talk to you soon, buddy.
All right. Have a good one.